Okay. Morning, everyone. My name's David. I'm one of the trainers here at Workamajig. Today's webinar topic is going to be about custom views and reports. So again, what we're trying to do is, again, do I have to use Excel to do some of my work? Maybe. What we're hoping is that you can actually do a lot of the things within Workamajig itself. Okay. Now, one caveat I'm going to give you right off the bat is, again, you probably already know this, Workamajig works on a SQL database, okay? So any of our reports and views is actually just SQL queries that we're building, okay? Now, there is one thing that's a little different than when you're querying a distinct SQL database is we are unable to form a table. So we can't say, well, give me this data, and then from that data, then do another kind of calculation across it. We can get variations of that, but for the most part, we can't off-store something and do that kind of post query on it. Okay, so just to let you know, so it's kind of like the things I'm going to show you is more how to include or exclude certain fields, or so the data that you get is that specific for that one thing. Okay, depending on how we form it out. Okay, so that being said, okay, the other is, again, we don't wholly support this. These are kind of the side tricks and things. So the best is always to just send in, your questions into support@workamajig.com. Give us the report that you're working on, or tell us what you're trying to get at, and we'd be happy to set that up. And we realize that you'll start to build your own kind of code library to do this in other reports. Okay, but we're always happy to help. We're always happy to put in these the baseline for you so that you can learn how to do this. But there you go. Okay, there you go. So let's start out by a couple of the most common things that we see. Okay, so one is, I can often see this one. I'm just going to come to billing, and this is just to demonstrate how we can deal with certain views, okay? So we know that in client invoices, and I'm going to pick one that I've created for several people, and it's called my deposit allocation by client, and it could either be taxable or no tax. Again, it won't matter too much, okay? So I had a client, and they do advanced billing, and they also, of course, do revenue invoicing. And it's like, how do I get these kind of separated out, but I want to see it kind of in one location? So what I did is I created this report. And again, the labels don't matter. You can always label them across. But the idea is I can see my client. I can see how much is sitting in OpenAR. How much did we put in for advanced billing? How much that advanced bill is remaining? What's the total revenue? How did they pay it? Did they pay cash, or was the invoice paid by the advanced bill? Right. So that's the idea of this one. So how did we actually kind of tweak the system so we can see this? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go to modify. And the first one we did is up here. So we have this idea of a calculated group. And what is the calculated group? This is basically us putting in a little bit of code so that it can differentiate certain things. So again, in this case, we use a case when. That's the most common one. So case when A equals or doesn't equal something, then give me this. Otherwise, give me B. If not, give me C, type of idea. And so you can see this where it says case when it's advanced billing invoice equals yes. And again, I'm surrounding that coding in hashtags, right? So yes, then label this grouping deposit. Otherwise, label it revenue, okay? So just with that simple tweak, I now have this, and when I open it up, you can see I can have revenue, and then in this one, I have deposit versus revenue. Okay. The next one we went to is we come down to here, and you can see that I'm still using the same case when idea. And so in this one, I'm saying, well, case when some field, again, equals something, right? Then give me this. Otherwise, give me something else. So again, I'm saying case when this advanced billing invoice is yes, then tell me how much I received. So that's telling me how much of this advanced bill was in paid already. Does that make sense? And so again, I labeled it whatever the caption I did. And so again, what this is looking for is those things. It's saying, you know, if it's an advanced bill, then give me that value. And so again, that's rolling up. It's a number and it's a subtotal. Okay. And I do that across all of those things. Again, as you can see in these other ones that I've done, I basically said, well, if it's not an advanced bill, right, that's coming down here. If it's not an advanced bill, then it's a revenue invoice, right? Kind of self-explanatory. And so when we say advanced bill equals no, then just give me the total amount, or give me the amount received, or give me the amount that was applied to it. And the idea of this one, and then I also said give me null, which means it'll make it blank, right? So if I come into the results here and I start to look at these results, you can see that I said, well, if I don't have a number in there, just make it blank. And that way, again, when I'm looking at it on the screen, it kind of makes it a little clearer. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Now, when we do this in the views, again, there's some things we can do. Remember that there's not a way to kind of roll things up other than by grouping. So when I do the ABC, go by client or whatnot, again, it has to roll up and it actually has to show every bit of data that you're doing. So again, we can take this concept of this case when that you saw, and we can apply that across the board really. So again, I can come into receipts and I could, again, I don't have any built out for this, to be honest, but again, I could say case when client ID equals, ABC, then give me a value. Okay. Otherwise, give me a blank. And then there we go. So again, that's the way I can apply those things kind of across the board. Okay. And I'll stop right here just for a second. So is there any questions about how I would get these things in a view? And again, the view is a little restrictive of what we can do in it, but there you go. Okay. So either in the chat or in the question and answer. Okay. Oh, somebody wanted to do the code again. So here we go. Modify this. And again, here's the code right here. So again, it just case when, and again, I can go ahead and copy and paste this into the chat. Okay, that all you can do that. So again, this is just for this particular one. So remember, you have to have that field available for it to be active in that particular report. But again, that whatever in bracket, right, single square bracket, that's the field from that particular report. And then what would be the response? Now, again, the equal sign. So equal is equal, not equal would be, I can kind of type this in for you guys, not equal. Sorry, I'll just do this. So kind of this weird SQL thing, that is not equal type of thing, greater than or less than, equal to type of thing. So it's these type, that's the way we would spell out those types of things. Okay. That out, so that still works. Okay. Now, again, that the calculated group is, again, when I'm using it up as a grouping. And again, that's usually I use that for labels, right? To get a particular label for my data. And then I can also do that, for example, if it was blank, and I do that often, like if it's actually doesn't have that field, then give it a label, right? So again, it makes it easier for grouping or to group like things down at the bottom. Okay. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually move into a report. Okay, reports allow me to do a bit more, and that's just because of the nature of the report. So I'm going to come into my report center. Okay, and I had a couple ones, and so this is a pretty common one I give as well, the timesheet backup. Okay, and so what did I do here? So again, just to give you data, I don't have that much data, so I'm just going to report it. Okay, so what I got was the user Okay. And I have the contractor and I have, again, then I did it by week and then I have their time entries, but then those time entries are slotted out and then I add them all up. Okay. Now, how do I get that is if I go to the modify, again, I did this one where it says, just give me the username. Okay. And so in that username, and then in this one, I'm trying to get the date. And so these are the tricky ones. It's usually better that you just tell us that's what you want to do and we'll give you this code. But again, you can see that this one's a little bit more complex in what it's doing. It's saying, well, convert this date field into something, into this other type of field so we can read it properly. Okay. So we're kind of converting the figure so it can display properly and actually just basically become a text field as opposed to a number or a date field. So there's this kind of tweak in the SQL code to basically get that stuff done. Okay. And like I said, a little more advanced, but again, that's what we're doing. We're just trying to get it so it shows me that date worked week. Okay. But here's the more common one is I'm breaking out. So I'm just saying, hey, when the date name and then what part of that date is, and this is the weekday, all right, of the date worked. So as you know, date worked, it has a date, but there's also associated with that in the background, as you know, there's going to be a day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's a week associated with it as well. It's part of the Microsoft, calendar week. It would be associated with that as well, type of idea. Okay. And so what I've said is basically say, if the day is Monday, then give me the actual hours worked. And so that's giving me a number, and then I can add those all up. Okay. Now, one thing that we can do with the calculated columns as well, and this is only available on reports because I've said group these rows together. Okay. So this is not available in the others. When I say to get a calculated column, okay, we have this feature where it says calculate after main query. So probably you guys have seen this and you're going, what the heck? Okay, so I'm going to name this as sum of week, right? For example, just to get that. I know it's going to be a number and I don't know what my formula is, right? But I'm going to say calculate this after the main query. So again, this is one of the variations that we have where we can kind of tablize it and then do calculations off of that table, but it's a little limited. So again, when I say calculate after main query, it's going to give me that calculated column here. Does that make sense? So that's actually the field name for that calculation. And so you can see that I can say, okay, let me add up all of these weeks. I've already done that with my totals, but I just want to show you, this is a really common one where I can say, okay, give me these. So as you can see, I'm just adding them in. I click on them, that adds them over. And it's basically giving me those 5 days. So column 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I had some who were doing 6 and 7. So I'll go ahead and add those in. And so what this is saying is once it's kind of finished running and I get the total for Monday, right, then put that number here in this calculation. So it's part of this finalized calculation at the end of it. So I can go ahead and subtotal this, and I've named it, and I'll go ahead and save this. And just for clarity, I'm just going to push this up a little bit. Okay. And I'll go ahead and apply this and run it just so we can see. Now, what I should see is kind of the total hours equals the sum of the week, right? So we can see, sorry, I should put those together. 1 and 1, 6 and 6. So you can see what it did is it just went through and added all these columns together. So that's another little tweak that you can do on these. Again, I have this one calculate, I have this one calculate. I just want to add up the grand total of those into a field. And that's the way we do it. It's that calculate after everything has its live and then give me numbers. Okay. Make sense? Okay. So, all right. Now, the other things that I often see with this is more like department. Okay. So let me insert a row here and I'm going to use department, and I don't know how many are in there. Okay. So I'm user department. Sorry, didn't mean the color. User department. And I'm going to use this to group. Okay. And just kind of playing with this one. and I say, okay, let me scroll over to the left here. Okay, so I have accounting and I have creative, and I have scheduling, and then I have this blank, right? That's what I was talking about before, right? So, okay, I have these blank, and what's blank? Blank means it doesn't have, the user does not have a department when they did it. So how would we get it to still display? Okay, so this is where I can actually come in and do a calculated group. Okay, and I can say department. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add, because I know what I want. It's department. So I'm going to use user department. So there I have it. And if you remember, I said case when, okay? And here's a little bit of a tweak, right? So I'm saying that one doesn't have a department. So it's blank. Well, how do I register a blank? So this is the way we take care of a blank. So it says is null, here we go, is null, put it in parentheses. And if this field is null, then make it something. Now, if it's a number, okay, I would use 0, but I know this is text. So if it's a number, I would say, if that thing is blank and it's a number, make it 0, just like you see here, okay? Does that make sense? But because this is a alpha, I have to put in some sort of letter. So I often use B for blank, right? So what I said is, if this is blank, so now that's saying just make it a blank. Then I say, if it equals blank, okay, then I'm going to say a department, okay? Else, give me the department. And then to finish out this code, okay, this little bit of code, I'm going to go ahead and say end. Okay, and then I go ahead and save that. That's my calculated group. I'm going to go ahead and drag that up to the top so we can see it happen. And I'll go ahead and apply these changes and do a search. And so now we had accounting and we have add a department. So again, that one group is add a department. Now you're saying, well, now it's up in the top of this, right? So again, I could put in like a Z at the front of it, or put in underscores, again, trying to get it to sort either to the top or the bottom. But again, that's what it's doing. So again, I basically said, if it's blank, then give me this result so I can group it better. Okay. That making sense? All right. So again, using those types of tweaks, that's what we can get at. Now, there's one more that we get, again, in reports that allows us, and this is in the filters, okay? So the filters, we do have this before grouping rows together. This is our normal filters, and we can do a calculated column, a calculated filter for this to kind of get at those. But we can also do kind of like, I don't want anything. So if I do the sum of my weeks, just a second. So you can see that my week sum total is at like 2 or 10 or 1 or something like that, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So maybe I have this long list and it's got a ton of stuff in it. I don't want to see all the singles. I just want to see something that's greater than 10, if that makes sense. Okay. So I can come in and I can set up a calculated filter and basically saying, after this is all done, right? That makes sense, which is my calculated 8, right? That was my calculation to arrive at, okay? And I know this is a number, and I can say greater than or equal to, and I can just give it a value. So I'm going to say in this case, 9, for example, right? And so I'm just saying, hey, after this is run, only show me rows that have something greater than 9 in it, okay? So I can go ahead and save that, apply it. I believe this will work. Oh, and it gives me an error. Okay, just as I thought, right? Okay. Use it greater than. That should do it. I actually have to do this. Sorry. Yeah, and sometimes it's a little bit of a hunt and peck in here. Yeah, see, that's why I get these errors in. And so I like to see. They're going to take that. So again, sometimes it actually takes a little bit of different tweak. Me? No, okay. Sorry, sometimes I get stuck on these, right? But I know I've done this before and I just can't remember. So maybe I'll do actual hours in here instead. That should work. Okay. So there's I went off of actual hours again. So I just said, give me, that's that total hours, right? So it's saying anything greater than 10, show it to me. So you see how that removed those ones. Okay. I know there's some other coding that I had to put in, sorry, to get it to calculated column. Sorry about that. But again, actual hours, and I'm going to go ahead and say greater than 40, right? So again, I think I had some that were greater than 40. And again, there we go. And so again, you see how it limits down my results. The other thing I could possibly do on this in my filters is to say, well, prompt for it, right? And so that way, that actually becomes a question before I run it. So now I can just say, oh, give me the time greater than, 20, right? And again, what are my results for that? And again, I get those different results for that. Okay. All right. So that really in a nutshell is, again, how I can use a little bit of SQL coding in order to get a custom calculated field to show or to group or to sort by, a result. Okay. So again, case when something, then it's this. Okay. The other thing that we can do, obviously, for a custom field, and you saw that when I did that calculation, where I can just put in things and just calculate them. So again, add A and B, A plus B type of things to do the calculation. The other thing that we can use calculated columns for is maybe you need kind of a static number. And I've seen this before, and I just call this a number, right? If that makes sense. And I just say it's the actual amount is 0, and I'm going to say sum it, right? Because I want every row to have it. And I subtotal this. And the idea of this is I would then get, a number associated with that, and it starts to add it up. So I can see that there's kind of 13 time entries that were happen and they got rolled up. That's why it's saying 13, for example. Okay. But I need that number because I'm going to use it. So I often see this with, for example, a rate. I want to say the cost of this person. I don't want to pull it from the employee record. I'm just going to say the cost of them is $50. So I could put 50 and then use that 50. It's going to show up everywhere. And then I can go ahead and do a calculation against that 50. Okay. I can also use the idea of count, right? So oftentimes I would here, and I'll go back to kind of a report here, project manager, today PM, projects. And for example, active projects, I may do a little different one for this. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, okay, make this one a count. I'm going to go ahead and say, oh, I'm just going to add one in and I'm just going to call this count. And because this is 1, I'm going to subtotal that. And because I'm grouping it, if that makes sense, I have this grouping. And so I can actually do this apply and search on this. And you'll see that my count is 1. But when I roll it up, you can see how many projects are over budget, 24. How many projects are on budget, 15, right? So this is a way for us to, again, add in a field and kind of use it to display certain information for me. Okay. All right. And that, like I said, in a nutshell, that's kind of, again, using case whens or just simply the field plus a field plus a field plus A minus B, right? Simple calculations we can do in those calculated columns. And there we go. So let's get to some questions. See if we can do this. I'm currently trying to set up the today's manager page with a helpful report for our directors. Would love a look at the views I can alter and best practices. Okay, so for that one, again, that's kind of a tough one, right? I'm in today's managers. There's not a lot in the today's manager, right? Because again, it tends to be, kind of overall things. So any of these views that you think would be appropriate, again, what do they need to see? Active projects, all projects, and what is it they want to do with them? So again, once I create a view, I can modify this to create a new copy of it. I always say, copy this view. Yes. And now it's called copy of, but I apply the changes, memorize it, and now I start to edit it. So now I edit the layout, I edit the filters if I need to, I edit the settings, and one of those would be I'd rename it, and then I would make it available to the people that I would need that to be available to, okay? So again, sometimes it's like, well, what question are you trying to answer? What do they need? And that's what I would, again, create that report for them. And that's kind of the best practice, I guess. Now, if they're not really in the system, remember that on all views, for the most part, not all views, but most views, and absolutely on all reports, after I run it, you'll be able to actually schedule the results. So the idea of this would be, again, send somebody a report. I think we've already covered that on a number of times. I can basically say, send this particular report, the results of this report, to these people, and I want it to go out daily, weekly, monthly. What is it that I want it to do, right? So if I'm doing it that daily, weekly type of thing, you want to make sure on your filters that the date range that you're putting in there is set up to be something else. So let me put a date here so I can see it. So I'm just using create date. So just think of it as a date. And then please use these ones. You can't use in or after, because again, it will always run for that. So again, use these types of things. Last month, last year, yesterday, last week, right? Use those types of things. So when it runs on Monday, it will always send out last week's new projects. Does that make sense? So next Monday, it'll do, again, last week's new projects, again, just based upon the filters that you do. That makes sense? Okay. Okay, I want to pull billable hours, but I want to exclude those users who are not billable. Okay, so when you say not billable, I mean, that has two connotations. Not billable for us would be they have a zero rate, right? They're putting time in, but there's zero rate on it. Okay. Okay. So again, that's actually a fairly simple one. So let me get back to my timesheet one, if that makes sense. Because I know I've been kind of editing this one around. Okay. So in that case, it's saying, well, I'd want to exclude the billable hours. That would actually be an easy filter if you wanted to. One of that could be, again, what is the rate? So the billing rate or rate, and I would say, billing rate not equal to 0, right? So that's going to exclude anybody that has that 0 rate, okay? And again, I could do the same thing to separate them out in my layout. Case when billing rate equals 0, then null, else give me actual hours. That makes sense? Okay, so again, I'm kind of using it to say, if it's A, then give me B, else give me C. Okay, so that would be a good way to kind of separate those out. Right? I'm looking for multiple production schedule views. Let's see, I'm looking for some ideas for multiple production schedule views. Okay, I was hoping to group share. Okay, so for the schedule views, okay, when I come into these, it depends on what you're saying for schedule views. Sorry, you can't talk, but you'd be able to clarify it better. We have in this particular view, which is again, these are my projects, sorry. If I go into the schedule itself, I have, again, certain columns that I can show, and we can actually set up column sets So again, in predecessor, you see that I have very different columns from if I say I need to see the schedule itself. That's all I care about are these columns. So you can actually set these up if you have the rights, and it's just called edit column sets. Go to the schedule, edit column sets, and that would give you, again, a chance to name it, and then what columns do you want to see, and then who has access to it. And that would be the way to get at the schedule itself. The other thing for schedules I often see is under Resource Manager, Traffic Calendar. Okay, show more. Tons of filters here. I can't really control this. This is a stock report, but I can have it memorize kind of my search parameters. So you can see here's the all task one. You see that things started to change. I do client portal. It gives me different filters. So again, you can save these, and as you select them, you can see that the filters themselves change. And so again, you would give people access to that, and you may even give them a calendar, because each of these actually has a calendar that you could subscribe to be honest. And then what they would see is this would be the results, but then I could go to the calendar and again, I would have results. Sorry, these are really old things that I have in here, so they're not really visible, but again, that would be the idea, is that I can set up those filters for them. And again, since the traffic calendar is kind of looking at the task, that would be the schedule for that. Okay. Okay, how to create formulas and calculate groups and columns. Again, kind of went through that one. Where I always get stuck, and at the moment, is not having an idea what I need to create the formula, what words need to be used. Okay, so again, the idea of that is, again, that the best is either I'm using the fields to say plus those together, okay, or I'm saying, again, case when A equals B, then C, else D, right, type of thing, okay? Okay. Okay, is it possible to create a report by month? Okay, so again, the coding for some of these, again, it's always best, just send us your report that you're part in and say, I want to see this by month, okay? And again, I had that report that's saying, show me the weekly, and I can just go by this again. Let me modify it. Okay, in this case, I was looking at Monday, right? But what I can do actually here, I'm not sure it'll come through, sorry, but and so date worked. In this case, it's saying, weekday, and I can actually say date worked, and I can say month. Okay, and then in this case, I believe it's going to be January. Okay. Then actual hours worked. So again, this is, I say date name month equals January. Again, then give me the amount. I'm going to go ahead and sum that and subtotal it. And let's see, I don't know if I have any January time, sorry. And it looks like I do, okay? So I would recognize that these 4 hours were in the month of January. So again, that's the tweak on that date name or date part or something like that in the code, okay? Okay, great question. Is there a cheat sheet for basic formulas? No. Okay, so that's why we always say, send it to us. You will get it, we'll send it back to you. So you would get a report that looks exactly like this. So it's like, oh, this is how he did this. Copy that out, put it into your library. Know that the only thing that would change would perhaps be just, again, some of the fields, I'm going to change it from date worked to date build to if it's a project one, I'm going to have project start date here, right? So again, whatever field you're kind of using, but this syntax is case when something equals something, right? Then that, okay? Okay, and to be honest, here's how I learned. To be honest, I say, how do I get the month in a SQL query. And here I go. And most of the time it comes up with these. I also see that my go-to, let's see. So this is my kind of go-to, Stack Overflow. That gives some great coding advice, but we're a little bit different. We're not apostrophes, it's hash marks instead of apostrophes as surrounds. But that's what I do. I just ask Google, how is it that I could get this? And then I kind of go through here. So it's like, okay, it might be this. What's the month function? And again, I just use that particular one. Month is this, then show me something, right? So again, it's just kind of pigeonholing it to us. And again, if you put it in there, we're usually happy to dig into it and say, okay, no, you have to do this with it. Okay, so that you can add it to your library. Okay. 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 And again, the fields themselves, again, as you see, when I added the field, they're in a square bracket, a single square bracket. That's them. Some of the other things that we can do in a calculated column, again, if it's just text, the concatenating. Okay. So I need two fields put together. So I might, for example, have the account manager and the user. And how do I get those two joined? Okay, type of thing. Okay, to concatenate things, this is a little bit different. I basically put hashes and then a plus. So again, plus hash hash plus, that gives me that plus the active user on the time entry. If I need something in between it, I put a space and then, for example, a colon in between the two things. Okay, and this works. This is how we would get kind of text together. So let me see how that goes. And using my last one over here. Oh, I forgot to change that to text. Right, sure. Yep, I left it as a number. See, the displayed is not applicable. So I need to change that to text, and that will give me that list. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that was just saying an active user. So again, here's the account manager on the project or time entry, along with a concatenated yes on it. Again, that could be, again, a department or anything like that to get those two together. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So again, I know I threw a lot of stuff at you. Again, some of this, the best thing to do is, if you want to give it a shot, go ahead. And again, I gave you the simple one that's in the chat. And I take it you guys are able to see the chat. And again, it would just be case when something equals or not equal to some sort of word or number, then give me results, else something else, and end that. Again, if you go through that, that's kind of the basic. The concatenation, again, is plus hash plus. And again, that's going to be the space between the two so they can concatenate. Okay. All right. The traffic report is located, again, Workamajig, Platinum, or menu, resource manager, traffic calendar, and that's the traffic calendar. Again, I publish the calendar. So again, to get the different views, basically I set my filters, and then when I say publish it, or after I do the search, it's going to let me publish that. Okay. So if I close this up, oh, why did I do that? Okay. So again, I'm just doing the search on it, and then I can go ahead and say publish this, and then that would again save those. I have to name it. Once I say publish it, it's going to give me a chance to name it and decide how the calendar events would show up. Okay. Okay. Now, again, I see a question that says, is it possible to create the timesheet report by month? And again, we can create a report that runs every month and gives me data from last month. Remember, that would just be a filter. So for example, date worked equals last month. And then I could basically, show me the time entries or however you want to create that. And then again, email it to me, or again, it would just be one of your favorites in there. Okay. Okay. And that's really all I had for you. I hope this was helpful. Again, if you have questions, again, I'm not hanging up. So again, if you guys have specifics that you would like me to kind of demonstrate, feel free. But again, like the cheat sheet and thing, we really don't have that, right? So it's just more, again, I gave you the one, that's the most simple. Again, if you start to use that, or just ask, hey, I'm trying to get this in this report. How do I do that? Then we can form that. And again, just tuck that into your library. Okay. Oh, chat is disabled. Okay. So you couldn't see my chat. Okay. I'm hoping everybody can see this. Okay. I think anonymous attendee, I'm not sure if you guys can see everybody's answers or questions. I think they're supposed to be. Are you able to see it? Okay. I typed an answer in, and hopefully that went. I know sorry, our New Jersey office is the one that kind of takes care of these. Okay. So chat is unavailable, but I put the answer into one of the responses. Okay. And again, if you wanted to quickly jot one down again, here, I'll just go to billing and the client invoices one. And there we go. And again, I just gave this one. So again, it's this case space when field equals not equal to the response, then deposit, right? Give me a word, put a word in, or else give me some other response. And again, where I put in deposit, that could be a field, right? Case when advanced build equals yes, then actual build, else null. Make sense? Okay. So again, this space, this area can just simply be a field name if that's what I want it to do. Okay. So that could be one of these things as well. Okay. Do we have a specific version of SQL? No, it's not really a version. I mean, we're on I think we're on 2016 or 20. We might be on, I forgot the latest version. I apologize. But again, the simple SQL queries, those are pretty static across the board. And again, we can't get too crazy with it. We will block that. And again, we will not form a table that you're doing, set this aside. So it's not true SQL program. It's more just, again, a SQL query. Look for this information and pull it out of the database. Okay. And then the query is specific to this data set that I made this report in. So again, there's not a way for me to go look at several others. Okay. 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 Any other questions? Okay. So if you're asking us to do a custom report and what you're trying to do, what's the best way to do that? Now, again, if you're tackling a little bit of this programming and, a little bit of these queries in, and you're asking us to kind of take a look at it, that's fine. Another way is, again, yeah, if you're saying, hey, I need to get this out of the system, how do I do that? Again, the best way is to send us an Excel doc, or, it can be a Google doc or Google sheet as well. But again, let us see what it is that you're trying to get at. And then if it has any calculations, of course, have something, a field in there, so we can see what the calculation is, right? So again, that helps us to say, okay, how do I, transpose this into Workamajig? Okay. Okay. And is there a way to pull fields that are not in the listed data set? No. Okay. If you're going to combine data sets, then you actually would have to use the API key. So every report, once you create it, has an API key, and that's dealing with our API. So of course, in something like Tableau or Power BI, you can grab different API keys and pull the data in and then mash it up any way that you like. In fact, we have quite a few clients using Tableau and ripping data from all over the system and displaying that into Tableau. And I know some others are doing Power BI and doing that same type of thing. But every report data set has an API key. Well, the report itself has an API key that you can rip data from. Okay. But again, whatever's in the data set, that's what I'm saying. That coding is only going to be looking at this one report data set or this report. It's not going to go outside of it. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Or any particulars you wanted to see, get a hint on how do I get this particular filled out or something like that? Okay. Okay. I'm not seeing any new questions. Um, give me a few more seconds if you're still formulating them. But otherwise, thank you guys very much for attending. Appreciate it. Again, when you close out, there will probably be a survey. If just a couple of questions, it's just asking what you guys would like to see in the future, things along that line. It's very helpful that you fill that out, so we can again bring the stuff that you guys would like to see. Okay. And again, further questions or more detailed questions, again, don't hesitate, support@workamajig.com, and your account manager is happy to help with you. The recording itself for this will be available, either tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. So it comes to us, we process it, and then put it up into a YouTube channel. And again, the link will be available in Workamajig. And I believe that you actually, if you do the survey and you registered, you actually will get a link to it.